One, two, three. Thank you so much. This is a huge privilege to be here today. One of the keynote speakers at this conference gave a keynote when I was in grad school, for example, and it's really humbling, to have this experience. I'm a big fan of Julian's work himself, so having him introduce me is humbling as well. Seeing all of you here is humbling. There are great other symposia happening at this time, including by a previous master student of mine. So if you want to go see those, that's completely okay as well. Okay. Good. Let's start. My slides are online. I do take credit for the open science stuff. I don't take credit for the other things, but I think we're doing well in terms of open science, and I'm happy this has made it into the literature. So, I want to talk today about the simple question why things co-occur in nature. Here you can see a flock of birds. All of you have seen videos like this before. This is the moment where you stop listening to me because you're engulfed in the video, but you can't do that. You have to pay attention to me talking still. Things co-occur in nature. Why do things co-occur in nature? There's two simple explanations for this behavior. And the Wikipedia on bird flocking has beautiful explanations why birds fly together. If you're a 14th century farmer, what is your most obvious and not implausible explanation of this behavior? Anyone? Could be God, could be a general captain bird who shows all the other birds the way. Biologists believe that for the longest time. It's plausible, right? There's one bird, maybe in the middle somewhere, maybe in the front, who tells birds how to fly. Now we go back to the early 20th century, 1905. Robert Koch won a Nobel Prize for this discovery. This idea of a common cause for things that co-occur in nature is highly plausible. So let's say you're a practitioner today or in 1905 and a patient comes to you, you're a GP, and the person has fever and a rash, like a red kind of thing. Eiko, by the way, why are you doing this in English? Are you German? Yes, but to the great shame of my parents, my German has deteriorated so much that English is easier for me. I'm sorry to all of you. Apologies. Now, you probably couldn't do much with fever and rash because folks who see a GP could have many different conditions with this. But Koplik spots, red dots in the mouth and tongue, those of you who are parents may remember that, indicates measles, right? Koplik spots is a great symptom because if you have Koplik spots, you always have measles. It's a beautiful symptom that is unfortunately very rare, both in medicine and psychiatry and clinical psychology. Now we go back to 1905. Any historians here or any folks really well trained? What is this mental disorder? Sort of? Anyone else? No, they called it general paresis of the insane, which is a pretty commonly given diagnosis back then, which is late-stage syphilis. Yeah? If your brain is deteriorating due to really late-stage syphilis, you get these sort of psych-like symptoms. And folks back then thought this is the evidence for a mental illness that has these personality changes and because it looks similar to depression and other mental disorders, right? This is where the idea started that there's, and then a couple of years later, they found, Robert Koch found infectious disease, bacteria and viruses and so forth, right? We understood that some conditions indeed have common causes that underlie them, like measles, syphilis and so forth. In this case, a couple of years later, they found syphilitic bacteria in the brains of folks deceased with this disorder. And this is how the idea was born that not only medical but also mental health problems have this one underlying marker and we just need to find it. This is where this comes from. 100 years later, 120 years later, we are in a pretty similar position. We have mental disorders in the DSM and the ICD. They're basically symptom lists and are written up in a way that you could think that depression is a disease and that these depression symptoms indicate an underlying condition, right? schizophrenia, bipolar. That's how the DSM largely looks like. Okay? This is also how we do psychometrics in 2024. Those of you working in personality, cognitive testing, and so forth, we give folks a questionnaire with 10 or 20 items. I give you a questionnaire that asks questions like, do you like to go to parties? Do you like to drink? Do you enjoy having people around? Right? This is an extraversion questionnaire. I give you a couple of items. I use these items to indicate the underlying trait or ability, extraversion. That's how a math IQ test works. I give you 2 plus 2, 7 plus 7 questions. And if you perform well, I infer that your mathematical ability is high. Yeah? So this common cause idea is deeply ingrained in the way we do science. And again, we answer the question why DSM features like symptoms occur together. From this perspective, depression symptoms like insomnia or sad mood are passive interchangeable indicators. It doesn't matter what syphilis symptoms you have, right? I just need to know you have enough symptoms for me to make a reliable diagnosis. That's the idea here. I don't care if it's insomnia or suicidal ideation for the diagnosis. All of these symptoms indicate an underlying condition, and interventions should focus on the underlying condition. A GP wouldn't treat a rash when somebody has syphilis. You treat syphilis. Yeah? This is a nice picture that a Finnish colleague of mine put on Twitter a couple of years ago. We can all see the kraken's arms. We can't really see the kraken itself, but we can use the arms to reliably indicate the presence of an underlying, in this case, literally underlying kraken. Okay? So, I can conclude my lecture here. We're nearly done already, fortunately, because we have found out the common cause for most mental health problems. It is not, as we thought for some time, the Freudian unconscious. It is obviously the broken genome and the dysfunctional brain. The results of this groundbreaking discovery in our field was absolutely epic, and we are pretty much done here. I'd like to thank my collaborators and my team. I'd like to thank all of you for having me today. The slides can be found online. Okay, maybe we're not quite done yet. Your response might be, hold on a second, Eiko, but there's all these things and researchers keep telling us that there's all these problems and we clinicians see these issues all day in the clinic. So perhaps a better summary of the last 100 years of research would be this here. Okay. Here are the challenges. I have 2 slides on this. First, mental health problems are prevalent, debilitating, costly. Whom am I telling this? I'm in the right room for this. You guys know this. Second, there has been limited progress in understanding, predicting, treating, controlling, explaining mental health problems. In my own field, mood disorders, I would argue pretty strongly that there have been no treatment breakthroughs that are available to most clients today in Germany in the last 30, 35 years. The mainstay is antidepressants and CBT, and they've been around for a while, and they work better than nothing, but no. And there also has been no dramatic increase in treatment efficacy over the last 30, 35 years. Yes, we can get more treatments to more people, we have online interventions, but it's not like efficacy rates have gone up in RCTs. If anything, they have gone down. Short intermezzo. I couldn't stop myself. But Eiko, we have psychedelics now. Isn't this all solved? No, it isn't. Please read our review paper on the problems in this literature. And if you want, you can watch my 45-minute video on all the challenges in the psychedelics science literature in our field. Whew, okay. So, second slide of challenges here. I'm not done with my first slide. There are high comorbidity rates, which is a problem for a diagnostic system, right? If most people have multiple personality disorders, maybe these disorders aren't set up in the right way, perhaps. We have equifinality and multifinality. That means I can take 2 of you who start with identical genes as twins in the same family, with the same personality traits and the same education, and you end up with one person developing schizophrenia and the other doesn't. And you have multifinality, the opposite, where people with completely different starting points get the same diagnosis in the end. Everybody knows about heterogeneity. You guys see this all the time. And in practice, of course, people differ from each other a lot. Not only in terms of symptoms, by the way, also etiologies, right? There's many ways you can get into a major depressive disorder. But on the other hand, there's overlap across disorders. Many of us believe in transdiagnostic risk factors, adverse life events predispose folks to a broad variety of issues in their lives. Emotion regulation, the RDoC framework, there's many of these transdiagnostic things, sleep problems, right? That is very common. There's low interpreter reliability, even for structured clinical interviews for some mental health conditions like depression. And questions surrounding validity. We have a paper on depression regarding validity if anybody's interested. But these are challenges we need to grapple with in science and in clinical practice in academia. So, this is me. The hand is me. This is my career in the last 15 years. The panda is this common cause theory for mental health problems. The ball is the common cause theory, and the panda is psychiatry, medicine, to some part clinical psychology. And it's been very hard for me to get this common cause ideas out of people's heads because it is so freaking intuitive and correct for many medical disorders, right? And maybe even partially correct for mental health problems. So today I want to introduce a different framework, and I'll try to do this in a new way because I have a new concept I learned about, and I kind of like this idea. I want to introduce homeostatic property clusters. Let me try. So this is Alice, one person. This person has features, variables, issues, problems, but I really don't want to talk about just symptoms today. I want to talk about personality traits and environmental stresses, all the things that matter for clients, right? You just don't look at insomnia and suicidal ideation. You talk about problems with the partner and the issues at the job and so forth. So this whole symptom modeling that we've done so much in academia or science, I want to go past that a little bit today. So Alice has pretty high neuroticism throughout her life, sleep problems, and is tired. It's pretty sad, stressed at work, has arguments with her partner, and a lack of self-esteem. And there's many more. She has a amygdala of a certain size. I don't know how much that matters, but it matters probably to some degree, right? She has probably some genetic risk factors for some problems, and so on and so on. Now, this is a homeostatic property cluster because Alice's features stand in causal relation to each other, right? Imagine a client with severe sleep problems and severe neuroticism. It's very unlikely that this person is happy every day of their life. Like these things just hang together in obvious ways, right? And you can look at this as a network or a system where these features cause each other, reinforce each other on different timescales and so on, but they hang together. For example, stress at work, at least for some people, will probably lead to being tired in the evening, being emotionally exhausted, and then at least I get into arguments with my partner more easily because I just don't have the energy in the evening to be mindful and listen and so on. And vice versa. If I have arguments with my partner, I sleep badly, I might have stress at work the next day, and so on, right? And this is basically a brief summary of the network or systems theory for mental health problems. There is no underlying cause for depression. Depression is a system of issues and resilience, but we will skip that for today because that complicates things too much. Now we go from Alice to the group level. We go to all of you in this room. If I measure your neuroticism and your sleep problems, and I measure your problems with your partner and relationship, and I measure your genetic risk and your amygdala size and all these things, and I make a plot, many of you will be in a roughly similar position in the plot. And that is because those of you who have really high neuroticism and sleep really badly will just not be the same people who also are very happy. Your points will be constrained, right? If A causes B to a certain degree, most of you who have A will also have B, right? And so if I make a plot, you will end up in the same position in the plot and you will cluster there. I'll explain this with a plot. These are 20 people. I chose the dimensions traumatic experiences, the degree to which these 20 people made experiences that are traumatic, the degree to which they experience sleep problems, sorry, and the degree to which they experience despair at the moment. And you can see that these 20 people cluster in some way, shape, or form. These are homeostatic property clusters, yeah? And I can call those depression, and PTSD. This is my take on what mental disorders truly are. They are aggregations where people cluster together because they have features that stand in relation to each other. Thank you for listening. Okay, I'll try to explain this better. We go through a couple more examples. So each of these clusters, by the way, has the most typical person in it, which is basically just the person in the most middle of the centroid. Right? Are these good descriptions for depression and PTSD? Probably not. You would know better. These are just examples. I'm telling you that I believe that DSM labels and ICD labels are superimposed post hoc on the complex landscape of mental health problems, which include symptoms, but also life events and personality traits and all the things that we do know matter for mental health problems and the risks to develop them. Eiko, that is outrageous. Depression exists in the real world and is different from schizophrenia. Well, I do think people with depression suffer, and I think we should help people with depression. I don't necessarily believe that depression, MDD itself, was invented by God and exists as a category in the real world in the same way that helium or gold exist as molecules or atoms out there. I think it's a little different. I think people have all sorts of colors and magnitudes of all sorts of diverse problems, and we give them names. And I think MDD is not the greatest name because people are so different from each other. I think spider phobia is a pretty good name because people differ from each other too, but they're a little bit more similar, the spider phobics, than the people with major depression, is my take anyway. Eiko, this is outrageous. Well, not really, because it works like this in all other areas of science. Biology. I took 3 features here: body size of animals, the sex drive of animals, and the amount of body hair these animals have. 3 random examples. Again, I have 20 individuals. These are 20 animals. And I'm going to call the left 10 chimpanzees and the right 10 bonobos. Biologists have decided that bonobos and chimpanzees are different species. This is a definition by biologists, and biologists will tell you, I'm going to try this fancy feature now. Oh, please. Bear with me. Oh, here. That here at the intersection, bonobos and chimpanzees can mate with each other. They can have babies together, despite being different species. In the same way that some Homo sapiens could mate with Neanderthals, different species. But if you're close enough in this multidimensional space, you can have babies. But most of the chimpanzees cannot have babies with most of the bonobos because they're too far away in the multidimensional space. So even in biology, read up the Wikipedia on species classification, people disagree on what species are in the same way that we often disagree if there should be complex bereavement disorder and about these particular classifications. Does it make some sense to you? Yeah? These are feature points in space. We label them because we need to. Ken Kendler, who I look up to a lot, always says, Eiko, in the emergency room, I need to make binary decisions. Do I commit somebody or do I not commit somebody? We need those labels to some degree. But for research, these labels are a vast underappreciation of the complexity of people, and clinicians in this room know that. You don't work with a label only. I'm really happy that this is also the case in the Netherlands, where CBT is pretty dominant. You work with the experiences people have and all the colors they have and all the magnitudes and problems and so forth they walk into the room with, right? At least most of you will in Germany in a praxis. Okay, so these are homeostatic property clusters. And the systems theory of mental disorder says, well, birds flock together not because of a captain general god bird, but because the birds influence each other in the same way that mental health problems cluster because these features stand in probabilistic relation to each other. Okay? That was my effort of trying to explain HPCs. So from a systems perspective, these features, such as adverse life events, sleep problems, neuroticism, they're autonomous causal agents. They matter to us. It matters to you, to me as a clinician, if you have sleep problems or suicidal ideation. This is news to many folks in the medical setting. For them, there are checklists like syphilis symptoms. It doesn't really matter what symptoms you have. They all are interchangeable. This is, of course, not the case here. The intervention should not focus on the serotonin levels in the brain, if that is not the true common cause, but they need to focus on the parts of the system that matter to the client. And some of you doing CBT and functional analysis will do that. Some of you even draw diagrams in the first 5 sessions on how when you're tired in the evening, you have arguments the next morning, and on Fridays you're suicidal. Why are you suicidal on Fridays? Oh yeah, there's this lunch break with your boss that's really triggering, and so on, right? And then again, the definition of depression here is that depression is the system. It is not in the system. A really fantastic paper on the topic, if you want to learn a bit more, is by Merlijn Althoff, who finished his PhD last year. I rarely read papers by early career scholars that have had such an impact on me. And we also have a short primer paper on this idea published 2 years ago. Okay. I think the lack of progress in research in our field comes from oversimplistic and reductionistic takes on mental health problems. I'm very happy that folks work on amygdalas and genetic risk scores. I think we need to do that in the same way we need to work on homelessness and poverty and social determinants and personality traits. But we can't only do biological work, right? And I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but these are 2 quotes. These are all quotes from 2 strategic NIMH directors in the US by Cuthbert and Insel, who defined mental health problems as brain disorders, brain circuit disorders, or dysfunctions of neural circuits that can be identified with tools of clinical neuroscience and treated by tuning these neural circuits, ultimately leading to a neuroscience-based psychiatric classification. And of course, this moves everything we do to the brain. Nosology, classification, the diagnosis itself, the mechanisms behind mental health problems, and I don't see adverse life events here, or poverty, or homelessness, or neuroticism, which seems weird to me, and ultimately even treatment. So, but Eiko, isn't reductionism amazing? Yes. Reductionism is the thing that we figured out in science, where I can repair a toaster without knowing what a toaster is. Because with enough time, I can take the toaster apart into all its constituent elements. I can fix every little part. I can put the toaster together and the toaster will work again. Because the toaster is literally not more than the sum of its parts. This is Ken Kendler. What some of you may not know about Ken Kendler is that he's probably the coolest scholar ever. I have a big crush on Ken Kendler. He's in Richmond, Virginia. He's a psychiatrist and philosopher. The second thing you know now, I have a crush on Ken Kendler, like a science crush. Whenever we Skype, I put mentally my Ken Kendler posters down in my office, which are there only in my head, but I always worry that he can see them. And third, Ken is an avid cyclist. This is his second bicycle. It's a vintage bicycle from the 70s. It was very expensive. People stopped on the street and said, "Hey, can I purchase this bicycle?" And I had to say, "No, it's not mine, it's Ken Kendler's." And when I visited Ken in Virginia, he gave me his bicycle for half a year, and I broke Ken Kendler's bicycle. This is a true story. So imagine me sitting there on the asphalt crying, being much more worried about the bicycle than my own, broken knees and things like this. But I could fix Ken Kendler's bicycle because reductionism works. It is literally just the sum of its parts. There's no interdependence. You move this, and this moves, and this moves, and repairing each element in isolation will fix the system. This is not the case for complex systems. This is a Dutch lake. In the Netherlands, many of our lakes, we have many lakes, and they tip from a blue, beautiful, healthy lake stake to this green, bubbly, dead fish swim around, dead on the top and so forth. Do you know that? It's called a turbid state. The lake is dead. And one of the largest funding sources in the Netherlands was ecology, always trying to fix these lakes, understand these lakes, fix these lakes, treat these lakes, predict tipping in lakes. It didn't work for the longest time because lakes were misunderstood as simple systems like bicycles. They thought, oh, what do we do with the fish and with the sunlight exposure and with the pollution coming in? But it turns out if a pollution coming into the lake kills the lake, turning off the pollution and even getting the pollution out of the lake will not help the lake, because it's a complex system. And complex systems require systems thinking. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice for thinking about mental health problems similar to how ecologists thought about lakes in the 1960s. As simple systems with simple causes. There's me in Virginia on the asphalt. It's a bad time. Okay, so I think mental health problems are better described as lakes than as bicycles. They're complex systems, and I don't think many people would actually disagree with that. The problem is how to do research, because it turns out, working on complex systems is pretty complicated. But I'm going to try that today. I think mental health problems are emergent states that arise out of these interactions, of these features that are people's systems. I think these systems are biopsychosocial. I work largely on psycho and social, more on psycho than on social, but there's actually 2 colleagues here who did a PhD with me in Berlin. And so, Roman, who was a sociologist whom I shared my office with, and I learned a lot from him, so I do always try to work more on the social part, the environmental part, than the psycho part, because Roman is still sitting on my shoulder. And we had a coffee yesterday, that also helps. Mental health problems are complex and they're dynamic. They shift over time. Depressive episodes are recurrent, right? We need to study the dynamics of mental health problems in daily life if we really want to understand what happens with people, I think. And so overall, this requires studying the systems from which mental health problems emerge. Okay, I'm going to briefly check the time. We're good. Okay, so these systems are exciting. System thinking provides real new opportunities, not only for diagnosis and treatment, but also for understanding, prediction, and so forth. Systems are cool because they can behave non-intuitively. They're called complex systems for a reason. It's really hard to figure out what will happen to a system if you start influencing it. That's difficult in treatment, but it's also really exciting. There's radically disproportionate causation, meaning you can kick the system a lot and nothing happens. But if you just tweak the right lever, a lot happens in the system. Super exciting. Many of you will have seen this in therapy. And systems can show emergence, and I love emergence so much, I made a slide on it. So emergence is a bit the opposite of bicycle behavior. For a bicycle, you can fully understand macro behavior from the micro level. A smart alien engineer could figure out how a bicycle works, because it is just the sum of its parts. Emergence means that the macro level behavior of a system can never be fully understood by studying the components of a system. For example, bird flocking. You can study an individual bird and its genes and brains and behavior all you want. You will never understand flocking. Hydrogen and oxygen. Water has the property of fluidity. And in physics, that's a whole realm of a field where people work on fluid dynamics, fluidity. Fluidity is awesome, but you will never observe fluidity by studying hydrogen or oxygen. You need to put them together, and then you get the emergent property that things are fluid. And there's more stuff there. For the causality nerds among you, or the emergence nerds, this is my favorite example. Nobody ever likes this example. Everybody's like, so what? But I'm not going to take it off the slide because I love it. So this is a book by Sandra Mitchell, who's a philosopher and a person working on social insects. I don't know the English word at the moment. And she has an example, the honey storage in a beehive. So bees collect honey. And once the honey storage is full, and the honey storage is an emergent property, none of the bees really know what they're doing, right? They all organize themselves independently in some way. And at some point, the honey storage is full, the emergent property. And then the honey storage being full causes the bees to stop collecting honey. And I hope there's one person in the audience who's like, oh my God, that's awesome. The emergent property causes back behavior of the features in the system. That is crazy, Aiko. I know you guys. Okay, so the systems perspective gives us new lenses through which we can study mental health problems, and I hope new levers to treat them. It provides utility for better for the 4 pillars of science that I think are the most important things: description, prediction, control or treatment, and explanation, which is really the holy grail to truly understand a process. 2 years ago, I had the huge privilege to be here invited by Winfried Rief, who I saw previously, who put a panel together on different perspectives on mental health. We ended up writing a paper from different perspectives, and I actually ended up writing up a part, this is just a short screenshot, on the utility to describe, predict, control. So if you want to know more about this, check out this paper. Also the other perspectives, which I think are complementary in part. And I want to briefly just spend maybe 5 minutes, 7 minutes to talk you through a few examples of potential utility. Yeah, Butter bei die Fische. I want to show you that this actually has some potential to do something rather than being a philosophical exercise. Okay? So, the first step in science has to be to establish robust phenomena. If you talk to a social psychologist and a personality psychologist and even a clinical psychologist and you ask them, what are the 10 things in your field that everybody agrees on? The 10 facts. You'll have crickets in the room, right? It's not easy to establish robust phenomena. In our field, one might be symptoms commonly go together. It's rare that more symptoms means people have fewer other symptoms or stuff like this. There's usually a positive relationship between problems people have. Problems attract problems. And then the second part of science is to explain these robust phenomena. But we need to establish them first. And description is the easy way to do that. So in the last couple of years, we have developed methods in the group in Amsterdam, but also elsewhere, to describe these systems based on data. Simple statistical methods, leveraging cross-sectional data and time series data to describe systems. Are these good descriptions or faithful descriptions? Probably not, but you got to start somewhere. This is a tutorial paper that led by Danny Borsbaum on different types of descriptions, cross-sectional, panel data, or time series. I think everything but time series data is boring, so we're just going to do time series data. And these are data, I mostly work on cross-sectional data, by the way, so this is pointing fingers also at this guy here. But anyway, this is a EMA data set, where it's not my data set, where folks collected data in a couple hundred participants over a couple of weeks, asking them a couple of times per day about stuff they're doing on their phone. And I just wanted to explain you how these systems look like. You get a contemporaneous system, and that means what are the relations between features, can be anything, at the same time. In this case, stupid example, not from clinical, if people were energetic at a given time point, they were more likely to exercise at the same time point. Makes sense. You don't exercise when you're out of energy, right? Blue means positive, thick means strong, red means negative, thick means strong. But now we look at the temporal relationships in the data, and that's a couple of hours predictive time interval, and we see that folks who feel energetic are more likely to exercise at the next measurement point, blue arrow, but people who exercise right now are less likely to feel energetic at the next measurement point. Makes sense. I just wanted to describe to you how these results could look like. This has been done on symptom and affect data and whatnot. This is the very basic setup of these system models. These are really fantastic folks. Many are early career researchers. If you're interested in this, check them out. I think the slides will be online also. At least I put them online on the OSF. I think this is streamed. So these are good starting points to learn a bit more about systems in clinical psychology. The second area I'm super excited about is control or treatment. Now, I, as an ivory tower academic, will not tell you, applied folks, how to do treatment. But we might develop methods that you think can enhance your experience, a client's experience, and maybe give us a couple of new ideas for RCTs. This is my take. Led by T. Henry, we tried to marry control theory to network psychometrics. Network psychometrics is just description using these network methods I showed before. Control theory is an idea in engineering and statistical physics where you take a system, the internet system in Germany, the water system in Leipzig. Where is the water plan? Where does the water flow? The disease network of COVID spread in South Africa is also a system. And you can now try to control the system and say, hey, I want to stop disease spread. Who do I vaccinate? I have 12 vaccinations left. I have 10,000 people. Who do I vaccinate? That is what control theory is for. I probably vaccinate the people who work in hospitals and have lots of social connections and go to parties every evening, right? So control theory will identify these targets. And in this paper, we take data from real folks, East Coast US, with complex bereavement. So they've had, I think, 2 or 3 years previously lost somebody in their life, and they really were still suffering from depressive symptoms. And you can see things like, so we estimate these, we use these network methods, we apply them. This is a single individual. I'm trying to use the pointer. Thank you. Oops. You see that SI in the middle has a strong blue arrow to TL. SI is suicidal ideation, TL is thoughts of the loved one. That means if people feel really, really bad at a given moment, the next moment they are very much more likely to think of the deceased person. Just as an example. And now we can tell the network, the algorithm, what node, what feature should we intervene on if we could only target one single element in the system? What should therapy focus on to try to get all the symptoms low? And many clinicians have intuitions on this, and that's not the main or the only reason we should be concerned about selecting treatment targets, right? You want to probably work on suicidal ideation quicker than slower because that's a bad thing to have. But anyway, so this method can tell you where you want to target your treatments and so forth. You can also simulate other treatments where you apply treatment to all the nodes and so forth and so forth. Just wanted to show you that there's some utility in these methods. Does this work? Would I use this in my own clinical practice? Probably not at this moment, but I think this is really promising, and I think T. Henry is doing very cool work on this. So you can check that out. Prediction is what I'm working on. A lake can be clean or turbid, right? There's the 2 states. A lake cannot be in 3 states. That might not be true for depression, but I'm using it as an example now, right? So let's assume people can be depressed or healthy, 2 states. These are called stable states. And when people are healthy and resilient to a perturbation, to flipping to a different state, so all of you are healthy, you guys are resilient. Now, if I bother you during your daily lives, and I measure how quickly it takes you to recover from perturbation, you guys will quickly recover from perturbation. It's Berlin. We've all been perturbed in the last 3 days, but most of you recovered. Somebody stepped on my shoes. I'm like, that's fine. I slept well. Doesn't bother me much, okay? You guys are vulnerable. It'll take you longer to recover from perturbations. That can be stressful life experiences, a bad grade, a big event, a small event. It'll take you a little longer to recover. In other areas of science, we have measured this. There's tools to measure how long it takes to recover from these daily experiences, stressors, goes for legs and cancer tumors and other things in other systems, the weather and so on. And we can figure out that this slow recovery is an early warning system for a change to a different state. Healthy leg, sick leg, healthy person, depressed person. And we can think of these as early warning signals. So my work is on early warning signals for depression. I'm trying to use these system models, and I'm not going to tell you how exactly that works, to see whether we can predict if people are going to get depressed. And then we're going to try and build an early warning system based on these early warning signals, which works successfully for weather forecasting, some tumors, stock market stuff, other systems somewhere, ecology. To do so, we have the Warren-D study at the moment, where we have 2,000 people. We follow over 2 years, and we have 3 months of EMA and actigraphy data, and we're trying to leverage this to see if this system idea actually works out. Because it's nice talking about it, but it would be even nicer if it actually worked and did something for us. Protocol paper here. Okay, lastly, last point. This idea of systems can have immense utility for understanding, not just for control. The Dutch researchers, my colleague Martin Scheffer and others, have shown this for lakes. And this is an example. Who knew that we were about to not be able to produce beer in Germany in 2021? Who has heard about that before? Who knew that the Italians had problems producing sparkling water in 2021? Okay, look at the news of this time. It was a dire threat to all of your well-being. What happened is Ukraine war, threat of no more beer and sparkling water. What are the intermediate steps here? Ukraine war increases energy prices. That's one that's easy. Germany and Italy have a lot of chemical companies producing fertilizer, specifically ammonia. Ammonia production is extremely energy intense. Ukraine war, energy prices go up. Companies decide to no longer produce ammonia. They couldn't sell it with enough benefit, so they just stopped doing that. Ammonia as a side product has CO2. Beer producers need CO2 to flush their barrels, and we need CO2 to make sparkling water. So Ukraine war, no more sparkling water, and nearly no more beer. Okay? It's not a complex system. It's a system, it's a causal system, and being able to understand this in time would have helped us to build CO2 reserves, or I don't know. It's just an example of how understanding a system, and in this case, this wasn't rocket science. We just didn't think about it early enough. How understanding a system can have immense utility for other things such as control and so on. Don Robinow, I'm not going to get into this, has recently used this network idea or systems idea to build a new theory for panic disorder, which integrates all the things other theories have said about panic disorder. You see the vicious cycle in the middle and so on. But we can build a mathematical model now. We can simulate data from this model, and we can see if the people who we're simulating based on this theory actually behave like real people with panic disorder. So immense utility for theory building and testing. Now I'm going to stop for real when I have some time for discussion. Otherwise, this is very boring for me, and pushback and criticism. Thanks to our participants, to my funders, to folks here. Thank you for inviting me, Thomas and others. Also, thanks for all the caterers and amazing people out there. And my team, especially Carlotta, Ricky, and Rayan, who are doing God's work in the study. And then, yeah, you can find the slides online. Thank you so much.